Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into Genesis 4 and 5, the ripple effect of moral choices. We're going to do a forensic examination of a localized family tragedy. Now, this source text might seem incredibly ancient, but it actually contains these deeply embedded psychological truths. What starts as a seemingly simple story of two brothers quickly escalates into a gripping narrative about personal responsibility, guilt, and the sweeping timeline of humanity. We're going to track exactly how a single moral choice ripples outwards, completely distorting a family tree before finally offering a glimmer of global hope.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this specific question is arguably one of the most famous, echoing lines in all of recorded history. Am I my brother's keeper? It's a completely defiant question, right? But the source text doesn't just toss this line out there in a vacuum, it builds an entire moral framework around it. Throughout this explainer, we're going to use this exact question as our lens. We're looking directly at the concept of personal responsibility. How do we treat each other? And what actually happens when we try to evade the consequences of our actions?
To understand the crime, we really have to look at the setup. Think of this as the prologue to a psychological true crime analysis. We've got two brothers, and they take two very distinct paths in life. Cain, the older brother, becomes a farmer. He works the soil. Abel, the younger brother, becomes a shepherd, tending to his flock. On the surface, sure, it's just a standard division of labor for early humanity. But as we'll see, this seemingly mundane detail totally sets the stage for a critical divergence in how these two individuals approach their relationship with the divine.
Now, what's really interesting here is the specific language the text uses to describe their offerings. For Cain, it says he brings an offering out of the crops the land had given him. It's generic. It's kind of just the standard. But Abel? Abel brings an offering out of the firstborn of his flock with their fat. The text is deliberately emphasizing that Abel's offering represents premium effort. It's the absolute first and the absolute best of what he has. And from a divine perspective, the reaction is night and day. The Lord looks with favor on Abel and his offering, but completely rejects Cain's. It's not about the nature of the job at all. It's entirely about the quality and intentionality behind the choice.
Well, Cain's reaction to being rejected isn't exactly quiet self-reflection. It's intense, burning anger. His face falls. And right here, the text delivers this chilling moral warning. The Lord speaks to Cain and essentially personifies sin and guilt. The text says, "If thy actions are good, canst thou doubt they will be rewarded? If not, canst thou doubt that guilt thenceforth will lie at thy door?" I mean, wow. It paints this terrifying picture of guilt as a predatory force, just crouching like a wild animal right outside the door, waiting for a single moment of vulnerability to strike. It's a stark warning that our actions have immediate, lurking consequences.
But the warning goes unheeded. Cain invites his brother out into the open field. And in that isolated space, far away from watchful eyes, the text records a grim reality. Cain turned upon his brother Abel and killed him. This is literally the first recorded murder in the source material. It's a profound, tragic escalation. We've gone from a rejected offering to a burst of jealousy, and finally to the ultimate act of irreversible violence. It's a terrifying testament to what actually happens when that crouching predator at the door is invited inside.
So the crucial point is right here. Let's just pause on that. Right after the murder, the divine voice asks Cain a seemingly simple question. Where is thy brother Abel? And Cain answers with that famous phrase we talked about, I cannot tell. Am I my brother's keeper? I really want you to internalize the heavy moral weight of this deflection. Cain isn't just lying to cover his tracks, he is fundamentally rejecting the idea that human beings owe each other care and protection. He's attempting to completely sever the moral tie between himself and his fellow man.
But the source text absolutely shatters any illusion that Cain can simply hide his actions. The response he gets is so vivid. It says, "What is this thou hast done? The blood of thy brother has found a voice that cries out to me from the ground." Notice that innocent blood isn't just spilled. It's portrayed as a physical entity that actively demands a divine response. It's the ultimate proof that our choices are witnessed, that violence leaves a literal stain on the fabric of reality, and that trying to bury our wrongdoings in the dirt, it really only makes them scream louder.
The fallout of this murder is immediate, and it is severe. Because the ground drank Abel's blood, it refuses to yield its strength to Cain anymore. The farmer is suddenly cut off from his very livelihood. He's forced into exile, becoming a wanderer and a fugitive on the earth. But there's a fascinating irony in the text right here. Cain is terrified he'll be murdered by whoever finds him in exile, so a divine mark is placed upon him. And this mark isn't just a punishment, it's actually a profound protection. It serves as a warning that whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance. So even in the midst of exile, the sanctity of life is aggressively guarded.
And this brilliantly illustrates how quickly moral decay accelerates across generations, because we track Cain's lineage all the way down to a man named Lamech. Think about this progression. First, God institutes a sevenfold vengeance to protect life and stop a cycle of murder. But generations later, Lamech takes that exact divine concept of protection and totally weaponizes it. He gathers his wives and actively boasts about killing a young man simply for wounding or bruising him. He literally declares that if Cain is avenged sevenfold, then he, Lamech, will be avenged 77-fold. What started as divine justice gets completely twisted by human hands into a terrifying culture of disproportionate violence and arrogant revenge.
Okay, I want you to physically take a breath with me for a second. We're going to step away from the escalating violence and chaos of Cain's lineage. The text gives us a major zoom out here, shifting focus to a macro-historical view. Adam and Eve have another son, Seth, and Eve names him, saying that God has raised up another seed to replace Abel. This is a deliberate, massive reset in the narrative. We're moving away from a localized story of murder and stepping into a vast, sprawling genealogy that's attempting to rebuild the entire human line.
And as we enter Chapter 5, we hit a completely different rhythm of reading. We start encountering these massive, almost unfathomable lifespans. Just imagine living for 969 years. That is nearly a millennium. That's the recorded age of Methuselah, the longest-lived human in the source text. And these massive numbers, they inject this profound sense of ancient awe into the text, stretching the timeline way out and emphasizing the sheer scale of the generations that passed as early humanity multiplied across the earth.
Let's move to and see how this builds across the timeline. The text carefully structures this lineage with a really rhythmic pattern of birth, life, and inevitable death, from generation 1 with Adam to Seth, the replacement, right down through the centuries. But I want to highlight the anchor figures here. We've got Enoch in the 7th generation, Methuselah in the 8th, a totally different man named Lamech in the 9th, who then becomes the father of Noah in the 10th generation. This isn't just some boring list of names. It's a bridge connecting the dawn of humanity to a massive impending turning point.
But right in the middle of that highly rhythmic timeline of "and then he died," we find a striking textual anomaly. The 7th generation, Enoch. The text says Enoch lived 365 years, he pleased God, and then he was not, for God took him. He just vanishes. In a world that is deeply scarred by Cain's violence and the creeping inevitability of death, Enoch stands out as this mysterious, peaceful exception. His divine exit offers this stark, beautiful contrast to the blood-soaked ground we learned about earlier.
And finally, this massive generational timeline reaches its climax. The Lamech of this lineage, again, a totally different character from that violent boaster we met earlier, has a son named Noah, and he speaks a powerful prophecy over his child. This one will bring us relief from our work and the toil of our hands, and from the ground which the Lord has cursed. Do you see the incredible narrative loop here? The very ground that was cursed back in the days of Adam, and then cursed again when it drank Abel's blood, is now the focus of a deep, historical longing for relief. Noah literally represents the promise of a whole new era.
So, from a single jealous choice in an open field to a timeline stretching across thousands of years, Genesis 4 and 5 paint a remarkably vivid picture of causality. Personal responsibility simply doesn't exist in a vacuum. Cain refused to be his brother's keeper, and it fractured his entire world. So I want to leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. If our daily localized choices are seeds planted in the ground, what kind of harvest will our descendants eventually reap centuries from now?